So this gets into some of the questions around methods. So as part of the Living Systematic Review Network, we've developed interim guidance for pilots and a protocol template for what needs to be considered with LSRs and how people might write it up within the context of the method section of a living review. So I'll just touch on the things we think need to be done differently. So the search frequency should be explicit. So with the Cochrane Living Systematic Review pilots, we're talking about monthly auto alerts of electronic databases and trial registers. I'm aware that trial registers, you can't search via auto alerts, so it has to be manual searching. But for other sources, it may not need to be so frequently. To be concordant with the Cochrane standards, the searches need to be rerun in full. There are others doing living systematic reviews outside of Cochrane who are doing slightly different things like abridged or adaptive searches. And that because the topic area is likely to change, because database listings can change, that those search sources and strategies could be reviewed over time. And you can also see where the yield is coming from and monitor and change the methods, perhaps yearly or with some sort of occasional frequency. Screening needs to happen ideally at the same frequency as searching, because there's no point in searching every month if you only screen it every 6 months. So that should be made explicit. And I'm not going to go into this in a huge detail, but one of the reasons people are excited about living systematic reviews is the idea that we can bring in some of these technological tools that can help to speed up the process. And this is what can help to make it really feasible and sustainable. So things like machine learning or the RCT classifiers and citizen science. So within Cochrane, we have Cochrane Crowd, but if they're going to be used, they should be described. With data extraction and risk of bias, there's no changes to the methods, but again, there are some tools that can support data extraction and risk of bias. Some of those are in earlier stages of development, so if you're going to use those, they should be described. And there's a couple of things to think about with data synthesis, is when you're going to put anything new into the review. So with the Cochrane LSRs, the default position is that anything new, so we're talking not just new studies, but new data for a study, new information about one of the included studies, should ideally go immediately into the review. But of course, there might be times when it doesn't really make a difference to the review findings, to the credibility, to the grade rating in any meaningful way, so that you can devise some decision rules about when new evidence will be incorporated. So it has to meet a certain sort of threshold before it goes in. And I mentioned that there may need to be adjustments for frequent meta-analyses. So this is an issue that applies to all updates of systematic reviews, not just living systematic reviews, but it becomes more of a pressing issue if you're adding new studies quite frequently. There is currently work underway in Cochrane about how this might need to be managed statistically, and there's no consensus yet on the best approach. But we are working with statisticians on this issue. And a couple of other things that need to be thought about is that, just like the searches, I suppose the review scope, the review question, and the methods, obviously methods for reviews change, so that you should pre-specify when you will sort of stop and do a bit of a stock take of the review and think about anything that might need to be changed. And then, as someone asked earlier, some thought about when the review will no longer need to be kept living, acknowledging that it can be quite difficult to really be really specific about all those different instances, but some thought is helpful.